Hi, I'm Dave, and I wanted to do a video review of Fritz Heiler's Carbon 7 SE Mark II bookshelf speakers. Back in 2020, I wrote an informal review of John Fritz Heiler's wonderful Carbon 7 SE Mark II bookshelf speakers, and I thought it would be fun to do a video version of that review. I think it's still a relevant speaker, and it continues to get a lot of love both on audio forums and also on YouTube. You can check out the recent review by Nemo in the link down below. This is a speaker that beat out for me a number of very heavy hitters. Dynaudio, Martin Logan, Totem, Klipsch, and Focal, none of them could stand up to Fritz's speaker. So this review is going to try to convey to you what makes these speakers special, along with a few facts about the speaker and how it sounds to me. I'm going to include details about the speaker, about my equipment, about Fritz in the links below. So let's go. Who is Fritz? Well, Fritz started building loudspeakers over 50 years ago, and his experience, both as a classical musician and as a cabinet builder, combined to help him realize his dream of building his own speakers. He has built and designed a wide variety of speakers over the years, and he's tried a variety of different amps, different woods, and different drivers to come up with what I think is a near perfect speaker. Because Fritz sells direct and doesn't pay manufacturers or distributors or wholesalers or retailers, his customers really get maximum value for their dollar. So while Fritz's speakers are not the least expensive out there, I think the Carbon 7s retail for around $2,800. Fritz has got a very economical model that allows him to compete with speakers that I think would be 2 or 3 times the price if you were really going to match quality and compare price. Fritz can make speakers in cherry and maple and oak and walnut and mahogany, and his speakers use the same drivers that are typically used in very expensive and highly rated loudspeaker systems. Fritz's speakers come with a complete money-back guarantee, minus the shipping, if you're not happy with them. And I think that this is one of the things that makes Fritz unique, is that he really understands that in order to know that a speaker is right for you, you have to try it out in your home, with your equipment, your acoustics, and make a judgment based on that. That's the only way you can be confident. Otherwise, you're going to be buying and returning, buying and returning. What are the Carbon 7 SE Mark IIs? The Carbons are hand-built and finished speakers. They are two-way vented stand-mounted monitors with a 7-inch graphite fiber paper pulp composite cone, a 1-inch ScanSpeak textile diaphragm with a wide surround dome tweeter. There's a bass reflex loaded rear port. Fritz uses Acoustic Reality Series crossovers without any capacitors or resistors in the circuit with the tweeter. He designed the speaker by meticulously adjusting the crossover by ear and hand, and this series crossover that he uses helps to accomplish some of the purity found in first-order crossovers, and this allows the speaker to work really smoothly with a wide variety of amplifiers, much more than most stand-mount speakers in my experience. The recommended power for these speakers is 30 to 150 watts RMS. The speakers have a frequency response of 38 to 35 kilohertz, an impedance of 8 ohms nominal at 1000 hertz, and a sensitivity of 88 dB. The speakers are really solid. They are 32 pounds each. They are 16 inches high by 9 inches wide by 12 inches deep. They're beautiful, and they looked great in my home. These are tube-friendly speakers. So I'm a tube amp guy, and while tubes are often thought of as not powerful enough for stand mounts or stand mounts of 88 dB sensitivity, I think the devil is really in the details. Tube amps don't like wild swings of impedance, and Fritz's speakers are really well behaved across the spectrum. This means that tube amps, such as my 60-watt Quicksilver tube amp, have no problem at all with the Carbons, even at higher volumes. Let's talk about listening. After some experiments with placement, I set the speakers on 25-inch stands, about 3 feet from the wall behind them, and about 11 feet apart. My listening chair was about 9 feet away. I tried other positions as well. They also sounded good, about 7 feet apart and 9 feet to my chair. But of course, this is very room dependent, and you'd have to play around. Let's talk about tone first because these are luscious sounding speakers. The bass is surprisingly full and quick and effortless. It's controlled. When I played Donald Fagen's Morph the Cat or Gary Peacock's acoustic bass, I heard deep, rich, coherent bass. When I played the Jennifer Warnes track, The Ballad of the Runaway Horse, Rob Wasserman's bass was detailed, rich, and woody. More atmospheric, more ambient tracks, such as Brian Eno's Apollo, asked for the bass in the speakers to create a fathomless spatial arena, and the Carbons really delivered. In fact, when I turned on my subwoofer, I have a REL, I barely realized that it was helping the speakers out. That's how self-sufficient the Carbons are in terms of bass. That said, I do think that a subwoofer added a little bit of extra dimension to the overall presentation and a little bit to the bass, but unlike other stand mounts I tried, this is not something I ever felt was really necessary with the Carbons. Let's talk about mid-range. Mid-range is especially magical on the Carbons. In fact, this may be the most important reason to audition these speakers. Male vocals, for example, are great tests for speakers' upper bass and mid-range. When I played Gregory Porter, the jazz vocalist, when I played him on these speakers, his sumptuous baritone materialized before me with confidence in the songs No Love Dying and Lonesome Lover. On Donald Fagen's H-Gang, I heard that double-tracked vocal of Fagen's, clearly articulated by the Carbons, right? There's a clever mix there that leaves just a little bit of space between the two double-tracked vocals, and they're not quite identical sonorities, and the Carbons really brought that out. Female vocals are another great test for mid-range, and on the Carbons, the mid-range for female vocals was intimate, it was sexy, it was full of personality. Jennifer Warnes has an expressive and wide-ranging voice, and on Lights of Louisiana and The Ballad of the Runaway Horse, the Carbons were breathy and powerful, always lush, but always liquid, always beautiful to listen to, never overdone. Piano, another really tricky instrument for speakers to reproduce, and the mid-range of piano, of course, is incredibly complex. Handled by the Carbons brilliantly. Jazz, pop, classical, right? Listen to something like Keith Jarrett's improvised lines or Glenn Gould's Goldberg variations. The Carbons were able to both startle and convey the strong personality of those players and the absolute character and uniqueness of the piano that they were using. Let's talk about treble. How about those highs? Right? Unlike other speakers that have metal dome tweeters, the soft tones on the Carbons acquitted themselves really nicely. High piano notes, for example, trickled and sparkled with body, but never with brittleness. Cymbals, another great treble test, had a friendly and musical tone. It was metallic and ringing, but in a way that was clear and resonant, never harsh, never brittle. Snare drums had a healthy kick, and nylon string guitars always were able to convey their various textures. So mid-range bass, treble, all just wonderful on the Carbons. So let's move to soundstage and realism. So soundstage is a reason that sometimes people will steer away from stand mount speakers. They're afraid that the speakers won't disappear. They're afraid that the speakers won't be realistic enough or be able to portray a wide or deep soundstage. Nothing could be more wrong about the Carbons. These speakers are able to recreate a wide, deep, and tall soundstage. They are capable of making live music sound, well, live. I played David Chesky's General Image and Resolution test track to see if the speakers were able to create sound that came to the side and behind me. No problem. The Carbons did it perfectly. Soundstage depth, and I think this is an important thing about soundstage, which often gets forgotten, is the depth of soundstage is very, very important for realism. And the Carbons do soundstage depth really well. When I listened to orchestras, I could hear orchestral sections that were clearly located. I could hear jazz combos occupying, each member occupying their right place on the stage. And when I listened to opera, I could hear opera characters calling across the stage to one another as if I was really there. Close your eyes, you will be there with these speakers. Let's talk about tonal realism. Instruments should sound like themselves. On Fritz's Carbons, they do. These are honest speakers. In other words, these are speakers that are not hyper-detailed, and they're not like casual coffee shop speakers. They're honest and realistic in a way that makes you relax and know that you are listening to the instrument you're listening to. When I played Charles Ives, I could distinguish piccolo from flute, bass clarinet from contrabassoon. I could distinguish snare drums, tam-tams, triangles, celestas, you name it. Every instrument was able to speak its piece distinctly and uniquely. Finally, a word about dynamics. So many of us have spent so much of our lives listening to compressed music that we tend to forgive speakers for not imitating the dynamic and oral drama that we find in life. But better recordings and higher resolutions are bringing dynamics back. The question is, can your speaker deliver? The Carbons can. They were up to the task of tracking big dynamic shifts, such as when a passage in Ives swelled from a whisper to a thunderclap so quickly that I nearly jumped off the couch. When I listened to Carlos Kleiber's Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, it moved from subtle to suddenly loud, right? And no problem, the speakers were there. When I listened to Lou Reed's Walk on the Wild Side, there's this creepy approach of the background vocalists, right, coming up from behind, and it really reminded me of the first time that song messed with my head 40 years ago. Really dramatic. Okay, what about the competition? Initially, when I was looking for speakers, I didn't consider a speaker by a small maker. I wanted to sort of waltz into a shop online, but I kept hearing about Fritz over and over again on forums. If you Google Fritz Heiler, if you Google Fritz speakers, you will find out. How do they stack up? Well, I think that they are just light years better than the speakers I heard in and around their price range and even a little bit more expensive. They bested the Focal Aria 906. They bested the B&W 77. They bested the Golden Ear Aeon 3 for tonal balance and for imaging. They also bested Dynaudio Evoke 10, 20, and 30 speakers, and they bested the Totem Sky and Skylight speakers. In fact, I think I would rank the Carbons above Spendor's floor standers, including the A4, which is, I think, priced at about $1,000 more than the Carbons. So what's the bottom line? Well, the bottom line for me is I have two ultimate tests for speakers. First, do the speakers get fatiguing? In other words, at some point, do I feel like turning them down? Second, do I get lost in the music? Do I get lost in the listening? So about the first thing, the Carbons are effortless, intimate, never fatiguing speakers. They always sound like music, and I never wanted to turn them down. They are refined but smooth. Second, these speakers are speakers that kept getting me lost in the music. There is no time when you're listening to these speakers. Time does not exist. All there is the rapture of song and sound. So in a marketplace that's crowded with newcomers and big names, it's easy to lose sight of master designers like Fritz. But these speakers are the real deal, and they continue to outshine the newcomers. The Fritz model of selling directly delivers, I think, an exceptional value. So I have no negative comments about these speakers. They are not floor standers, they are stand mounts, but they are as good as many floor standers that I've heard. I heartily and unreservedly recommend these speakers to anyone looking for an end game bookshelf speaker. Thanks for listening.